frontline workers. We're going to describe the lack of digital literacy and problem solving using technology in low-wage jobs in the U.S. and describe why this provides adult basic skills programs with an opportunity to partner with employers. We'll also describe how access to mobile devices supports improvements in workers' basic skills, describe case studies of where and how these opportunities have been realized, and describe how adult basic skills programs can involve employers in employee mobile learning. So we're glad you're with us. To that end, we have a couple of questions, and we're going to ask you to take a look at those questions in the chat field and help us get a better sense of your familiarity with mobile tech. So the first poll question you see is, how comfortable are you with using mobile tech? So if you could take a moment and respond to that. And then the second question you'll see is, have you heard of mobile tech being used in the workplace to support improvements in workers' basic skills? So again, we'd ask you to respond to both of those questions, and we'll give participants about another 30, 35 seconds to respond, and then we'll look at our results. Okay, and it looks like our polls are closed. So just to review the results here, it looks like we have a pretty strong community of people who feel confident and have used them with students before, them being mobile tech, with that 40%. And then we have about another 26% who are comfortable using them with students, and another 26% who are shaky but getting it, which is great. So I think there's something in our presentation today for everyone at all levels of experience, and I'm glad you're with us. So the other question, have you used mobile tech in the workplace to support improvements in workers' basic skills? Again, it looks like a majority, a slight majority have, which is great. And we have a smaller community who haven't yet, but again, we hope we'll give you some thoughts and ideas today to think about how you might be able to do that in the future. So we'll move on to our introductory slide and our introductory speaker here today, Allison Asher-Weber, and I will let her take it away from here.
Great, thank you. So my name, again, is Allison Asher-Weber, and I've had the opportunity through a nonprofit called Building Skills Partnership to work in the last 15 years in California with janitorial companies and the SCI union that represents a lot of the cleaners in the industry. And I've seen the industry shift from workers slowly, using beepers to walkie-talkies to cell phones. And right now we're seeing a mobile revolution of frontline janitors, the cleaners themselves, for the first time being asked to carry mobile devices and use them on the job to enter in information about what they've cleaned, be able to, so it's basically facility operations software that the janitors are being asked to use. At the same time, there's a second mobile revolution in that over the years, we have seen more and more of the cleaners holding their own mobile devices, whether it was a smartphone or basic phone, now more and more smartphone. And as a nonprofit, we realized we need to shift from just sending teachers out to work sites to train the janitors and think about the opportunity of mobile learning that's being presented. And I'll get to share that later, but so this mobile revolution is not just happening in the janitorial industry. So as we look across other low-wage work sites, we're seeing the same thing being asked of what we would consider lower skill workers in the retail space, postal courier, healthcare, hospitality, transportation. And so I don't know, I've had the chance to shop at Ross here in California, and you can actually check out now your purchases just on the floor with someone in a bright shirt using a mobile device. And so frontline just salespeople now are being asked no longer just to use the cashier, but actually know how to use mobile devices to enter in sales. Another good example of the retail space is the big rent-a-centers. We have them here in Oakland, they're across the country. And all the new hire training is now being done mobile for their staff. So now if you just want to be a frontline cashier at a rent-a-center, the new hire training across 3,000 stores is being done online, where new hires have to be able to study online and use their mobile devices to learn the job, but also work in the stores. Postal courier, that's to be able to track the packages using mobile devices as people deliver. Healthcare, my colleague Allison Simmons will talk about that, but frontline nurses, medical staff are entering data and tracking care now through devices. That's at all levels of staff. Hospitality, in the hotels, even the room cleaners are entering, like the janitors, data on the rooms they've cleaned, and I'll speak more about that. But everything from front desk check-in to the cleaning of the hospital is being managed through operations software now, so all levels of staff need a certain digital literacy. And in transportation, think of taxi drivers or truck drivers. They're obviously using mobile programs for their for getting directions, like with UPS and online directions, but they're also now increasingly doing their distance learning training as an employee to stay up on operating procedures and their requirements as an employee through mobile learning systems. So Uber and a lot of these employers are way ahead of the game than I would say our adult educational system on training lower skill, not always, but this is across various countries, so Uber Mexico as well. 100,000 drivers through mobile apps and educational learning systems just through smartphones, and a third of their workforce each week, so it's 30,000 workers are taking courses every week to stay updated on their job as an employee on the phone. And then other industries, I've had the chance in the last 2 years, I shifted towards mobile learning and had the chance to speak with employers in manufacturing. Now, factory floor workers are entering in data and checking changes in manufacturing procedures that they need to be following on their devices. And even in food processing, I got to speak with the HR, with the Kraft Corporation. They're at their poultry processing plant, so these are people cutting and processing chicken. More and more, their online cooks, like the people operating the ovens, are now being asked to learn to use mobile devices to control the ovens and how the chicken is processed. So with this is a huge opportunity to think through low line level workers are now learning to use these devices and what could be done. At the same time, more is being asked of workers who might not already have those skills. The second revolution I'm seeing is in HR, where the janitors I've worked with for many years in California traditionally would get their pay stubs given to them in an envelope, or they'd pick it up on Friday when they got their hand check. All of HR and payroll is being moved online. So companies are saving on HR costs by asking workers to log in themselves to an online site. It can be done through a mobile phone and get access to their paychecks, to do their scheduling requests for even their schedules at work, get all their information on their health care, their retirement, et cetera. But that's not something all of the workers themselves are able to do if they don't have the digital literacy skills. And so seeing this as an opportunity to partner with the company is something we can speak more about later, but saying, okay, if you're making that shift and you want the janitors, you're going to save on HR by not having HR staff print out the pay stubs anymore. Where's the win-win for the workers, and what are they being trained to do at the same time? If you're asking them to learn to use the online systems for HR, what can you add? And we had a janitorial company in California say, hey, help us, but we can then put links to online learning programs, whether it's open educational resources or programs like USA Learns for learning English as a second language. We will put that onto our payroll website with the links out to move more janitors into those online learning programs. And then, of course, the third mobile revolution, I think of it as operations, HR is the first two. The next one is just the ubiquitousness of more and more of the low-wage workforce are having cell phones. They're not all smartphones. You know, the numbers vary. We could say even up to 75% are. But 92% of people in the United States have cell phones. And so how do we use those to reach the 32 million adults with basic skills in need of remediation, in need of literacy help, who are currently not getting it? How can we reach them through their cell phones? And how do we use their employers in a win-win partnership to get access to this workforce and train them in the digital literacy skills to not only advance on their jobs and in their careers, but also learn all the basic skills they could now have access to mobile learning or online learning. And so with that, there's still a challenge, and I mentioned it, that we could send out a lot of open educational resources to the janitors on their cell phones, but if they're not digital literacy or not digital literate, they're not going to know how to take advantage of those sites. At the same time, employers are asking the janitors to go onto the HR systems, but if they're not digitally literate to use them, it hasn't been working. And so I'll pass it to my colleague David Rosen to speak about this challenge.
Thanks, Allison. So the challenge that Allison mentioned is that Americans lack digital literacy, and along with other Americans, workers do. There is an organization called the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, known as OECD. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, think of this as a group of the better off countries of the world. And several years ago, they launched the Program for International Assessment of Adult Competencies, which is known as PIAC. And this launched an international survey of adult skills. And the findings are not very encouraging, especially in the United States. Of all the OECD countries participating in the survey, the U.S. scored the lowest in digital literacy and problem solving using technology. And this comes as a big surprise to many Americans. We like to think of ourselves as being technologically sophisticated as a country. And incidentally, the U.S. was also among the lowest in numeracy and mathematics, and it was predictably low in reading and writing skills, very consistent with our national surveys, the NOWs and the NOW that have been done earlier. So the implications of these results may well be that for employers who are shifting to rely on employees' smartphones and tablets, that many of the workers, especially line workers, but not only line workers, may not have the basic digital literacy skills that they need to use their internet-accessible mobile devices. And in addition, they may not have adequate numeracy skills, math skills, and skills in reading and writing, and definitely don't have the skills that are needed in problem solving in a technology-rich environment. So, Allison, back to you.
Great. So this challenge presents an opportunity, and this is sort of the discussion I'm really excited to be starting with colleagues around the country, is how can we take advantage of the fact that often the employee training departments or the HR departments in corporations across the country do not have the experience in training workers on how to become digitally literate. Or how to learn these skills of problem solving, basic academic skills, the things they need to be able to go onto an HR website or use the operations software system that they're implementing. And they're nervous about introducing the shift because they know workers are going to be nervous and scared and push back. So this allows adult schools, community colleges, large CBOs, smaller ones, you name it, but anyone can come in with an appropriate approach to ask employers to partner and say, hey, we can help you train the workers to become digitally literate and help you in a way that will give your workers the skills they need to increase your efficiencies on the job. And we can partner, and they'll even pay for it if they see the advantage of having your staff do it. But what I also want to talk about is not just offering the skills for them to only get workers on to the HR system, but how can it be a win-win training partnership? So in this next slide, we're talking about approaching employers and saying, hey, we'll help you train them to use that HR site, to use that operations software. So, janitors can go in and enter what room they cleaned, and if there's any problems with the room, et cetera. And that's bullet one. But how can we also then at the same time give me extra time and let me teach them how to navigate online educational resources and other things they need for their outside lives? Let me help them learn to use Google Maps. Let me help them get on and access their kids' website. And what other websites can they use to help learn about other opportunities in their careers, other training programs they could be doing? And at the same time, so not only is it teaching the digital literacy for work, but the digital literacy for their outside lives, but at the same time, how can we think about the work being done, this lower skill service work, as enhanced work, and build in a conversation from the beginning about, okay, if the janitors are adding to your efficiencies and adding value to the work, could there be a step built in, or by a step I mean a promotion and even a pay increase built in for the janitors who learn those digital literacy skills? Could that be a career ladder that's built in? So these are all the questions we've been asking here in California, and the Building Skills Partnership as a nonprofit that works with employers and unions has been part of this conversation for a few years now, and about a year ago got to roll out a pilot of training 31 janitors to start in exactly what we're talking about, the digital literacy skills to get on and receive work requests. So this is when the facilities department would say, hey, please go clean room 31, there was a party, it's extra messy. Instead of getting that request by walkie-talkie or even perhaps a text, nowadays they want it all on email for tracking. And so we took 31 janitors, and the site they worked at was actually the Google headquarters in Mountain View. So, I get that this is not always possible, but we were able to ask for 500 tablets from Google to help roll out this pilot, but also get tablets in the hands of janitors across the state in traditional classes for blended learning, and roll out with the 31, just teach them basic digital literacy and make sure they have a positive experience. So with that pre-training, even though they're in the heart of Silicon Valley and they're cleaning the offices of Google, 44% had never used the internet, 50% didn't know how to send an email, and of those that could send an email, some percentage of those still couldn't find their inbox when we tested them. So there was a lot of potential for improvement, and after 6 hours of training, they're split into 1 to 1.5 hour sessions, and we actually had some volunteers in the program. We were able to train them in basic, this was taught bilingually, basic digital literacy, get on, navigate the internet, open your email account, reply and respond to emails, and they all opened their email accounts. 80%, so most could learn to read and reply. There were some basic literacy challenges that we still needed to address for that other 12%. And half of them could actually get onto a more involved software and complete a work order online after only 4 hours of training. So this was seen as a big success, and Google, who's the client here, and the subcontracted janitorial company, Brilliant General Maintenance, and then our nonprofit, Building Skills Partnership, committed to fund the expanded pilot. I'm going to talk about lessons learned first and then what the expansion will look like. From the pilot, we just saw just incredible excitement from the janitors about learning to use internet and Google. Here's Elena, a night janitor, saying she had studied up to 4th grade in Mexico, and she said she never thought she'd learn to use the internet and Google, and remember she works at Google. Now I use email and Facebook to communicate with family in Mexico, and I've learned how to use Google Play, Google Maps, YouTube, and I can get on and use my children's grades, see their children's grades from their website. And at the end, really, and the teachers confirm this, you can't separate me from my tablet. So she has truly become a digitally literate adult and employee, but also, I think she'll be a lifelong learner as a result of now knowing how to use the tablet. So from the workers, we asked them a lot of questions. If we could come back and expand this pilot, what else would you like to learn? And here's a list. It's everything from learning more online learning programs, more, social media and video chatting, taking notes. The taking notes was interesting because it's more of a blended model where they could take notes on their tablet and then bring the notes to their teacher in class about what they wanted to learn or words they needed to learn. You'll see a list here, but what I find really exciting is, learning to access their health care. They're all Kaiser members in California, and how do they go on and manage their health and learn more about their health online? Their kids' schools, their communities, online banking, HR, you name it, and they were all very excited about it because it was introduced in a way that was not scary, and it was also introduced where it was very professional and part of their career development. And so for lessons learned,
Anita Barker.
Our staff was just impressed by how easy it was to teach workers to use the internet and use email on a tablet as compared to a computer. That's much faster. And workers were much less scared to start using it and also explore new functions and explore new programs. That kind of learning curve was much lower, as we know. We did realize that we needed a slightly longer sessions to allow students that exploration and to gain that confidence and not just stick to exactly what we were teaching them. We also learned that if we wanted to build in sort of the steps or that career pathway model, if they would get paid more if they learned certain skills, we obviously had to have negotiated that all from a little earlier from the front end, and we'll continue to work on that. But just as a flag, it doesn't just happen automatically. You got to plan it in and from the beginning. And lastly, while tablets are ideal for the basic job functions of email or work requests or some of the software for operations or HR systems, there comes to be a point where if a janitor wanted to be a supervisor, they would need higher advanced computer skills and to need to be using Excel or have a bigger screen to become a supervisor and do scheduling online or do finance online. And so just be aware that there comes a point where workers will still need access to traditional computer literacy on a computer. And so with this pilot, we'll be expanding it hopefully in the next year to all janitors at Google. That's over 100 and something. And we'll be partnering to go much deeper on the digital literacy skills and raise the bar so that they can actually go in and use a higher level of facility operations software. So now we're not just talking about, at this point, sending and receiving work requests. We're talking about, so Google as a headquarter, as its facilities are using now its own system that's like a Nest that will notify you mobily if a soap dispenser is out of soap, or if a waterless urinal needs a new a replacement screen, and so, or even, eventually, like even if a toilet is clogged. So the janitors, even to track the use of their time and what room they should be going to care for and clean is going to be all online, and then even reporting problems all online. So there's going to be a trickier level of digital literacy required. So that's very exciting. We'll get more time with them. And then we hope to replicate this at many more sites, like Facebook, other high-tech companies. I'm hearing music. I don't know if anyone else is.
I am too. I thought it was part of your presentation.
Right, when I said Facebook. No, and other high-tech companies.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Allison. Sorry to interrupt, but whoever is not speaking, if you could please mute your phone, I would greatly appreciate it. So if you are not speaking at this time, please mute your phone. Thank you so much.
Okay. And then the hope is to expand with the tablets. I mentioned we were donated tablets. We want to expand into all of our traditional classes across California, do more blended learning. We got so excited about the use of tablets in class, but to expand this across both the workplace classes, but also classes that we hold out in the community. And then just the opportunity, since we've seen so many of the janitors carrying smartphones, a few simple phones, but how can we share learning resources through their mobile phones that reaches the thousands of workers who we could be reaching through their phones, but who can't get to a class. They clean a work site that's too small for us to send a teacher, or they live too far from one of the community locations where we have classes. And so how can we be using mobile learning? So that's to be determined, but from this, we're just seeing this huge opportunity. And so even switching industries, as I've been out in California talking, I've learned more and more about other industries that are making these same shifts. And in Los Angeles, the union-based hospitality training academy, it's through the HCR Unite Here union for restaurant and hotel employees. They have their training academy that's in conversations with the Hyatt Hotel in LA to train the room attendants to use hotel management software. Very similar to the Google pilot, but room attendants at a hotel. And the HR department purchased 100 iPads for the attendants to carry on the cart. Now, if there wasn't a training program part of this conversation, you can imagine that HR would just train the workers to use the operations software, and the workers would use those 100 iPads on the job, and that would be the end of it. But because there's a training provider involved in the conversation, the workers are going to also train in broader digital literacy and how to learn on these tablets, and how can these tablets be also used in a blending learning model in the workplace English classes. So the tablets are used in some of the classes held at the hotel, but also the workers could potentially take those tablets home and study online on any of the online ESL or other learning sites that they could be using. So I just see this as very exciting that this is happening across what we'd consider low-skill workers, and how can we take advantage of this? And I'm excited to pass this now to my colleague Allison Simmons, who's been working in healthcare.
Okay, thank you. My name is Allison Simmons, and I'll be spending just a couple minutes talking about our programs in Massachusetts. So I work for a training fund that is a labor management partnership, and we work with 1199 SEIU Healthcare Workers East, who work in hospitals, nursing homes, and also work as personal care attendants. So we're in sort of a unique position because we work really closely with the union and management on educational and training programs for our members. So in terms of technology and mobile devices, if there was going to be a huge shift, at these hospitals or nursing homes, then in a perfect world, the union would know in advance if there was going to be changes, because it would be a job duty or job responsibility change, and they would have to be alerted to that. And then the Labor Management Committee would work together to try to figure out who will be delivering the training and what kind of training is to be provided. I mean, it doesn't always work that way, and, in a perfect world, it would. But I think what the important thing is that, with these shifts that Allison was talking about, there is a mechanism in place to have the discussions on how people are trained. So that being said, so I went and asked kind of the administrative organizers, the union leadership, and also my students to figure out what were the technology or mobile device shifts that they were seeing in the near future. So kind of what we saw was that, as Allison mentioned, there was a big shift in the HR piece, which was the job applications, the job upgrades, and if they wanted any payroll or benefit information, or even information about their schedule. That could be done on the computers and as well as on their smartphones. For certified nursing assistants in our nursing homes, they would have to do some more documentation about their patients on a touch screen. So these kind of were implemented in a couple years ago. And so if anything has shifted in the past year or so, it's just been a shift in the system. But what we were also seeing was the opportunities, as Allison was talking about, of these expanded learning outside of the classroom. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then also this use of some of our members or students in using mobile devices to gain an understanding of patient care. So in order to so the delivery for most of these trainings were through employer trainings at the work sites. And those were driven, those were brief. So our members started coming to our adult education classes and asking our teachers to help them navigate some of these systems on their phones and on computers. Because in reality, I think we saw a similar shift to what Allison was talking about. Our students were more likely to buy a smartphone or a small tablet than they were a laptop or a computer. So we were trying to think of kind of ways to start integrating it, because when they came, they were asking questions and they couldn't access a lot of these systems on their phones. So at the same time, we kind of reviewed also what we were offering and thought about how best to work with them so that they could use the technology that they have and that they always have with them. I mean, computers they don't carry around with them, but they always have their smartphones with them. So we kind of looked at our computer classes and talked to the students and the teachers and kind of made a shift to integrate more of the use of mobile devices in our learning. And so, we kind of also informed the employers about what they were asking people in terms of skills, but also our teachers weren't really trained well or comfortable teaching mobile device skills as opposed to regular traditional computer skills. So there was a little bit of a challenge there to kind of, bring our teachers on board, kind of really identify what people have and work together to develop lessons so that we could provide them with the education they needed. And so we also learned that that our students were taking the initiative to use their devices to understand their clients, to understand trainings like a GSLC Learn Free, and to also improve their language skills. That was like the key reason that they wanted to use their smartphone. So in addition, we rethought our technology options. So previously our computer trainings were to work on basic Word programs in Excel, which is what some of our students or some of our members still need because they're college bound and they have jobs that require it. But we were also very interested in finding ways to enhance our members' learning outside of the classroom, since our workplace education classes are very limited in time. I mean, we don't have the luxury of having people every day. We have them maybe once a week. And we have a lot of members who work in nursing homes who are unable, as Allison mentioned, too, to come to classes because of their work schedule or because the nursing homes are too small for us to send a teacher. We also have a lot of personal care attendants who are, working individually with a client and can't leave that client, but have a lot of time while they're there to use mobile things. So we wanted to do this by doing a couple of things, kind of seeing what they were using the phones for, but also introducing them to some online education programs. So, these students had much more of an interest in using gaming, which they did on their phone anyway, and more so than kind of a word processing thing. They wanted to use it for translating, for texting, for gaming, or viewing. A lot of the students looked at YouTube videos for instructions on some of the stuff they were doing on their jobs. For some of the classes, we started to integrate more mobile technology and started first trying to identify where they were having problems. So some of the things that they mentioned were a lot more elementary than we assumed. For example, logging in, getting back to home, staying in the program, meaning, once they got bounced out, how to get back in the program. Also hitting the wrong thing and getting to an unfamiliar screen and then not being able to get back. So that was a huge level of frustration for some of these online tools that they were using because they couldn't get back. They didn't know what to do. And then essentially navigating a learning site. So our students use a variety of online programs, whether ones they have found or ones that were teacher-directed. Skylab, which is a gaming platform to help students with vocabulary and sentence structures, for example, has been very popular with members and employees at our site at the most elementary levels. One, because they can use it in short bursts of time. They can use it on their breaks, and they can use it on their way home. So we were trying to find them and to help them use technologies that could come in short bursts, where they didn't have a long time to kind of sit and work with them. But I think one of the more interesting things that came out of looking at some of these issues with the union and the students was that members were doing and using their smartphones in a lot of very creative ways to increase their knowledge of the job skills, vocabulary, reading, and in healthcare in general. One student who is a personal care attendant uses her phone to record what doctors say, and she accompanies her clients to the doctors or to the hospital, so she can learn from what they say. And then she can go back, listen to the video, look up the vocabulary and phrases, and then and understand what's going on. She also records videos of how the nurses will move her client when they're at the hospital or in the doctor's, so that she can go back and watch those so she can perform the same kind of task. So these kind of things she just took on her own initiative. And when I was talking to my student at the end of last week, she says she uses her phone in a very different way. She is a housekeeper at a hospital, and she takes pictures of a room after she has cleaned it, so she can prove if anybody says that it wasn't clean, she has proof that she actually did it. So in terms of kind of thinking about recommendations, we're really very interested in figuring out, since our students and our members, the employees use the phone so much and they're always at them, we really want to figure out how to best identify them with learning opportunities on their phone so that they can, so that this can enhance their skills. And one of the things we want to do too is to kind of educate the employers to look at some of these programs, and some of them do come with a cost, to say, these things are very effective in kind of increasing people's language skills, increasing people's interest in kind of what's going on in the hospital, and to kind of present them with a lot of different options that they might be able to, purchase for their employees or support their employees as they kind of do language skills. So we also want to advocate for training beyond office products. I think there's kind of two technologies, and I think at least adult ed and, around where we are is really kind of focused on the computer hard skills. And I think as we see more and more of our students using smartphones and seeing that what they're doing with, there needs to be kind of a shift. So we're actually teaching both at different times and for different purposes. And then we want to work with employers to learn where employee skills need to be developed, because as I said, when we were first kind of teaching mobile devices and how to use your smartphones, we were kind of shooting for a much higher level than what was really needed. And we had people come in and, it was even working with the sound or moving your phone horizontally to kind of develop those skills so they don't get frustrated and stop moving ahead. So that's kind of where we're at now. So I think I'll send it back to David.
Thanks, Allison. Actually, thank you both, Allisons. That was fascinating and rich in helping us all to better understand how mobiles are actually used in the workplace. What I want to talk about first is some considerations, and particularly if you are an organization that does workplace basic skills education or is exploring doing workplace basic skills, and you are interested in addressing some of the issues around mobile technology. What are some of the considerations that you will want to think about. So one of them is whether to use laptops, Chromebooks, tablets, or smartphones for your mobile devices, and others that also exist, but those are some examples. And all of these are useful devices, and some of them are more ubiquitous than others. As Allison mentioned, smartphones are in the hands of many more employees than our tablets or certainly Chromebooks. But for some tasks, let's say, for example, if employees are doing work-related basic skills learning, let's say, for example, that they're preparing for the high school equivalency exam. These now, by and large, require the extended response writing. And for that, smartphone screens may be too small. And a computer or possibly a tablet may be the only device that really makes sense, or of course, a desktop computer. On the other hand, smartphone screens are ideal for the short burst learning that Allison just described. There is also another issue, which is that some very good websites are not yet optimized for smartphones. So for those, it's going to be most likely computers or perhaps in some cases tablets. But mobile devices offer some tremendous learning opportunities for English language learning, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, for reading and math skills learning. There are English language learning games for improving English reading and writing apps, and also for speaking and listening. And there are also lots of opportunities for learning through videos, which people can view perfectly fine through their small screen smartphones. Numeracy and math videos, for example. There are, of course, many others. And there are also mobile learning management systems. Some of them you may be familiar with: Edmodo, Schoology, MindFlash, and others. And these offer some terrific new opportunities. So I want to talk just a little bit as we think more about partnerships between adult basic skills organizations and employers. What kind of capacity do training organizations or adult basic skills programs need in order to partner with employers and organized labor around these issues of basic skills learning, but particularly basic skills delivered through mobile devices? So one of the things I would recommend is something we've been doing in Massachusetts for decades now, which is if you're creating a workplace basic skills program, develop a planning and evaluation team, one that includes all of the stakeholders involved in the workplace basic skills process. Employees, of course, their supervisors, human resources representatives, and where applicable, organized labor. And so you may need some help in learning about how to do that and to do that well, efficiently. It's so important because where you have these different stakeholders at the table, you want them to come together. And incidentally, probably the best task to do that is the actual curriculum development process, so that all of the critical issues for each stakeholder are represented and negotiated through the planning and evaluation team meetings. Another area where workplace basic skills programs need some skills may be in doing what's called a workplace basic skills needs analysis or needs assessment. And the purpose of these is to find out what numeracy and reading and writing and digital literacy and digital problem-solving skills using technology are needed by employees. And then finally, you may need some skills in competency-based curriculum development and definitely in contextualized curriculum development to deliver workplace basic skills programs of any kind, but also increasingly to deliver workplace basic skills that use portable digital devices. So as we talk about partnering basic skills programs with employers, other kinds of capacity that might be needed are advising employers on developing career pathways. Now, with many large employers, that's not an issue. They've already developed those. But particularly with small companies, they may need your help in developing those. And they may also need some help in understanding how to define and definitely how to communicate internal career pathways effectively to employees. They may need some help in identifying how to measure the outcomes of a basic skills or basic skills training program, and how to collect performance data to do that. And they may also need some ideas on how to incentivize, or you may need some ideas, as a basic skills program on how to incentivize employers to pay for digital literacy training for low-skilled workers, and how to pay for purchase of tablets. Incidentally, one very common strategy is for large employers, at least, there often are budgets for managers to take post-secondary education on a reimbursement basis. And so one of the things as a basic skills provider working with an employer you can suggest, if you know they have such a fund, is that they can make that available to their line workers, and that it might not be post-secondary education, it may be high school equivalency completion or other pre-post-secondary kinds of skills. So we are almost at the point where we are going to open for discussion, and so if you have been holding your questions back, now would be the time to begin to enter them into the chat window, and we'll have probably about 10 minutes for discussion. But lastly, before I move on to the question and answer time, there are a couple of things more that you might want to think about as you approach an employer. The first thing is to identify the local industries that Allison pointed out, the 5 major ones and other ones in one of the earlier slides that really are already moving rapidly to incorporating mobile devices. And you'll want to research who the human resources and operations people within a particular company are to contact, and you'll want to contact them requesting an exploratory meeting. And then in that meeting, you will want to present how mobile devices will help both employees and the employer to accomplish both sets of goals. And then finally, you may want to ask questions about the employer's training needs, particularly for entry-level workers or other workers who may have low basic skills, and ways that you as an education provider may be able to help them to improve the efficiencies in their company. So Allison Asher-Weber, maybe you would like to just say a little bit about this before we move into the question area?
Yeah, sure. So I think the hope of this webinar for many of us is to encourage providers, educational providers across the country to think about how can we, by approaching employers, bring educational opportunities, whether it's digital literacy, basic skills, or that combination, to that 32 million who currently are falling outside of our system. And so we're going to have to strategize, and in every industry it's going to have to look a little bit different. But what has worked for me is, asking for that exploratory meeting, listening closely to what the employer says, anything they say about improving their bottom line efficiencies and how they'll save costs is what you need to think about, and prepare a 2-page proposal that gives a quick background on the opportunity. It's okay to admit where you don't have all the answers, and make a list, and you'll see at the bottom of this proposal, like discussion questions, what I still need to find out from the employer to craft or design a program. Draft the possible deliverables, like X number of training hours, 31 work requests, the pricing, cost, the structure, and then make sure you have in there a timeline for future meetings, because especially if they're running operations, they're very busy people, and you got to pin them down. Same as when you first contact them, you can't just call and leave one message or send one email. You're going to have to, in a very friendly but persistent way, contact them many, many, many times to get that meeting. And then even once you send the proposal, contact them many, many times in a friendly, persistent way to be able to follow up and talk about start launching a program. And of course, provide your contact information. I think one thing in training staff to do this outreach to employers is they're very nervous to be too persistent, too annoying. But remember, these are business people, so they're used to salesmen. They have trained people to be salesmen. So when they see your persistence and your go-get-it attitude with them, it actually makes them respect your training organization or your adult school all the more. And so I just want to push people to go outside their comfort zone and be persistent when approaching an employer, and that you'll actually gain their respect that way. So that said, we're excited to look at your questions that have been submitted. And I know all of us are going to be available on links in the discussion areas over the next few days, so we'll be excited to answer online as well.
Great. Thank you, Allison and David, for an information-packed presentation. And as David had mentioned, we have a little bit of time left for a couple of questions. We encourage you to keep typing your questions, though. If we don't have time today, we will be addressing those questions this coming week, as Allison just mentioned, Tuesday through Thursday in the Links Community of Practice. So we encourage you to join us there if you don't get your answer to your question today. So the first question that came in is asking, are there examples of successful digital programs working in very rural areas? So I'll turn that over to the panelists and see if we have any thoughts on those types of programs.
Allison Asher-Weber, do you want to talk a little bit about CellEd?
Right. So I've had the chance to work on some mobile training programs. One is CellEd that provides instruction through text and audio as well. And I think that was a great opportunity. We worked with Community Action in Texas and other organizations that are outside of like the main cities to reach workers that may not yet have consistent internet access. And that was a great way to introduce workers to being able to learn on a cell phone. But in terms of rural areas for mobile learning, I think the employers and distribution centers and factories, as long as there's a workplace, I mean, look at Walmart, right? They're in a lot of the rural areas of our country. They are using mobile learning. So they've figured it out, and how can we learn from them to partner in those areas on bringing online and mobile learning opportunities to the people of those regions. So I don't have those answers. Do any other panelists have an answer there? But I will just say, like, craft in the Carolinas, you know, these are rural areas that they have a lot of their assembly plants, but they're using fully mobile, you know, they've moved to mobile factories for their software that runs their operations.
There was an earlier question. Someone was interested in having us repeat some of the mobile learning management systems. So there are a couple of free ones that I'm familiar with, Edmodo and Schoology, both actually pretty widely used now in adult education. So that's Edmodo, as in David, and Schoology. And then there are three others that I'm not as familiar with, but Allison, you might be. MindFlash, Kedzo, that's Kedzoh, and EdApp.
Right. So one of the questions I saw as well is how do you work with learners without checking accounts or don't have, let's say, don't have a credit card on at the App Store? The last three you mentioned, and I think some of the Schoologies, et cetera, you actually don't need to be able to download an app. These are mobile-enabled websites where you go in and you don't have to download any app. When you follow a URL link and go in, you start learning. And sometimes you don't even need to have an email address. You can enter in your name and your cell phone number, or your name, like Allison A., and a password that the school has assigned you. A lot of schools just give the same password to every student, so no one will ever forget it. And just the student just starts learning online on their phone. So you don't even need to download an app or have a checking account or have a credit card connected to that.
All right. Well, again, thank you to our panelists. We are just about out of time. But I also want to encourage everyone to join us this week. Also, today marks the one-year anniversary of Upskill America, and you can check out a lot of other great resources on upskillamerica.org, and also check out a blog later this week on the Hawk Day website for more resources. So we encourage you to do that as well as join us in the links community this week as we continue the discussion and we answer your questions as they come in to us. So again, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you later this week.
And one more thing, we're going to put up a survey link as well. So if everybody can take a look at that and copy and paste the survey link to your browsers, we would greatly appreciate that. Other than that, thank you so much, and we look forward to moving the discussion on to the links community of practice. Thank you.
Hello?